Episode 3, Chapter 3, A Night at Amanita Inn. Chapter 3, A Night at Amanita Inn. Until now, Vivian had always felt safe in the shadows. After all, darkness was the first thing she had ever known. She had been born in it, slipping softly into existence in some dank, forgotten pit beneath the ruined palace of shadow, with no one but the gloom to welcome her into the world. Shadows had been her first sights, her first thoughts, and for a while she hadn't known there was anything else. In the years that followed, she learned to trust the shadows with her secrets and safety. When Beldam said something cruel, she would find a shady place to sit and cry. When Marilyn beat her, she would hide in the darkness until the pain went away. Much later, after Mario saved her from that awful life and they fought for the world together, he inspired her to train and master the powers she had. They had used the shadows tactically then, to gain information and protect each other from harm. They were serenity and bliss all rolled into one. They were a part of her, Vivian knew, body and soul. But the heavy, oppressing darkness hanging in the sky tonight was different. It wasn't serene, or nurturing, or safe. It felt cold and unnatural, as if life and light had turned their backs on the world and left hollowness behind to fester. Vivian could feel it crushing her, weighing her soul down with doubt as she made her way across the marshy field with Mario and the others. Blackness crept at the edges of her sight, and as she stared into the night she was certain she felt it gazing back.
"This is no longer your place,"
it seemed to whisper.
"You are not wanted here."
And that scared her more than she could say, because if the shadows didn't want her, then what was her place?
"No, not now. Think about it later."
This was not the time for worries like that. She was on the run, and the most important person in her world was in peril. Vivian didn't know very much about human biology, but she understood blood loss. Mario had been stabbed during their harrowing escape, and he would die if they didn't find help. That's all that mattered for now. Far behind them, Peach's castle burned to a ruin. The distant light of the blaze did little to illuminate the uneven wet ground, and the tall grass hid many pitfalls. Luigi let out a groan as his twisted ankle snagged on a root, and Vivian winced at the sudden sound. After everything they had seen and heard tonight, everyone in the group was more than a little on edge. They stuck together as best they could, each trusting that someone among them knew the way to safety. Yoshi was out in front, casting wary glances every which way as if the Grey Iron Army might descend upon them at any time. Mario lay in his saddle, silent and still, as Vivian glided close beside and kept pressure on the hero's wounded leg. Luigi trailed after them, supported as he limped by Toad and Toadette. Last of all came Lady Bow, drifting lazily along like she had seen it all before. Together they made their way through the darkness, towards the soft, beckoning light of a candle, the last light in the world. Across the field, a small wooden cottage sat at the end of a shallow glen, the candle flickering on the sill of an upstairs window. Tall, solemn trees rose to either side, their branches outstretched like thin fingers, poised to snatch the little house back and away into the dark forest beyond. In a tired half-daze, Vivian wondered if the dwelling would be gone before they could reach it. Uneasiness began to set in as they drew near.
"There's no telling what kind of people live here,"
Luigi warned the group.
"It could easily be an outpost for those bad guys, or worse. We need to stay alert." "No, he's wrong,"
Vivian thought. This mystery house was their only hope, so she had to hold on to optimism with all she had.
"There will be soft feather beds, a warm fire, and a kindly old toad who makes yummy stew,"
she promised herself.
"They'll know just how to heal Mario, too."
That was the most important part. Vivian would gladly go hungry or sleep on the floor 100 times if it meant Mario was safe. She felt her hope waver, just a bit, when they entered the yard. Up close, the house was a pathetic sight. Thin plywood walls leaned haphazardly against each other, held together by bent nails that jutted from surfaces at odd angles. Tree branches clawed at the roof shingles, and even as the group approached, one came sliding off and landed in the grass with a pitifully damp thud. Off to the side, a shabby garage had been constructed from tent poles and a torn blue tarp. Altogether, it looked as if a strong kick could topple the whole thing. There was a porch but no garden, only an unkempt lawn of dying marsh weeds. A set of muddy tire tracks emerged from the garage, if you could call it that, and led off into the field and out of sight. To the left of the door, a simple hanging sign displayed the word "in" in a careless scrawl. The sign caught everyone's attention.
"It just says in,"
Toad helpfully noted.
"What kind of place is this?"
Yoshi gave him a blank look.
"Obviously it's an inn. Are you feeling okay?" "That's not what I meant,"
Toad insisted.
"What kind of inn doesn't have a name? It doesn't have much of anything, really. Aside from those tire tracks, there isn't even a road out here." "It is pretty suspicious,"
agreed Toadette. Vivian couldn't exactly say she was wrong, either. In spite of her earlier optimism, the place was dismal. Bow floated past them all, up onto the porch.
"If this is all it takes to get you lot on edge, then Gusty Gulch would be the end of you. I think it looks quite cozy."
She made to face through the splintery wooden door, but turned back and grinned.
"Well, are you coming inside or not? I doubt you'll get much beauty sleep out here in the gloom."
That was that, then. Luigi nudged open the door to let everyone inside, and with one last, weary glance back the way she had come, Vivian entered. The inn's interior wasn't much prettier, but at least it was a bit warmer. A small cook fire burned in a hearth at the back of the room, and a smoky lantern hung from the ceiling by a twisted nail. Chairs and benches filled the space, surrounding a makeshift plank and barrel counter cluttered with bottles. To the right of the hearth, a dark hallway led deeper into the cottage, while to the left, a staircase crept up to some kind of candlelit loft. Nobody was admiring the scenery, though. Instead, all eyes were on the gruff-looking Nugan behind the counter, polishing a glass and watching the group with a steady gaze.
"Come on in, strangers,"
he grumbled.
"You lookin' for a place to stay?"
Bao jumped at the chance.
"Yes, we certainly are. We'd like to rent enough rooms for everyone here, if you would be so kind." "No rooms here,"
the Thugan told her,
"but there are beds in the loft. You're welcome to 'em, if you like."
He reached under the counter and brought out a bottle, popping it open with a claw.
"You all look pretty tired. We can talk payment in the morning."
Luigi drew closer, eyes narrow.
"Rolf, is that you?"
At that, the innkeeper narrowed his eyes in return and put his elbows on the counter.
"How do you know my name, stranger?"
Luigi looked confused.
"It's me, Luigi. Remember? We met in Toad Town, back when you ran that badge shop for a while with your son."
Rolf eyed Luigi up and down, saying nothing, then stepped back and took a swig of his drink.
"Nah, not me. You must have me mistaken with somebody else, friend." "Something isn't right here,"
Vivian thought.
"But he knew your name."
The innkeeper shrugged.
"It's a common enough name, among Duggans."
He seemed to catch sight of Mario for the first time, then.
"Say, what's with your buddy there?"
Vivian and Yoshi surged forward as one, suspicions forgotten.
"Please," Vivian begged, "you have to help him. He's, bleeding pretty badly, and
she trailed off as Rolf leaned over the counter to inspect Mario's leg. Rolf seemed to ponder the situation for a moment, then gave a curt nod and turned to the hallway in the back.
"Rainy, get out here,"
he called.
"There's a guy in seriously bad shape." "Oh, I'll be right there,"
a voice from the hallway called back. A moment later, a pink-spotted toad scurried into the room, nearly tripping over her dress. Her eyes were tired but kind, Vivian saw, and partially hidden behind a tangle of unruly blonde bangs.
"Rainy works here,"
the innkeeper informed them.
"Her husband, too, but he's out for the night. Anyway, she'll get your friend all patched up."
Rainy looked a bit guilty.
"I've seen my fair share of wounds like this," she admitted. "Help me get him into the back, we'll find a place to set him down gently." "Thank goodness,"
Vivian sighed to herself.
"There really did turn out to be a kindly toad here."
Together with Yoshi, she followed Rainy into the back room, which seemed to be some kind of cramped kitchenette, and together they set Mario down on an empty countertop. Rainy was bustling back and forth, grabbing supplies out of cabinets and boxes.
"Okay, so, we should probably cauterize this, to start. Can you grab the iron from the hearth in there, please?" "Cauter what?"
Vivian had to ask, this was a new term for her.
"That isn't the thing where she has to cut his leg off, is it?"
That thought made a shiver of panic run through her.
"Oh, no. How will Mario run and jump if his leg is missing? This is terrible."
Yoshi was back with the iron, and Rainy began pulling up the leg of Mario's overalls.
"That means we have to burn the blood vessels shut, to stop the bleeding. It's pretty painful, but it has to be done." "Oh."
Vivian didn't know what else to say, but she suddenly felt very small and empty inside. As Yoshi pressed the iron to Mario's skin, Vivian ignited the tip of her finger with shade fist and looked at the tiny orange flame.
"I didn't know. I could have helped him this whole time, but I didn't know how. I'm totally useless, just like Beldam said." "I'll just go,"
she whispered before gliding back out of the room. She wasn't needed. The other two didn't even seem to notice her leave. Back in the main room, everyone seemed to have gone upstairs except for Luigi, who sat on a bench by the window sipping a frothy mug of something. As if sensing Vivian's discomfort, he spoke.
"He's gonna be all right, you know? These folks will take care of him." "Yeah, sure,"
was all she could say.
"He'll be fine, no thanks to me."
She plopped down on a bench of her own and stared at nothing. Rolf cleared his throat, breaking the silence before it fell.
"So, where are you travelers from, huh? This is an awful strange place to be, this far past midnight."
Vivian looked up at the innkeeper. From what she could tell, he was still polishing that same glass.
"I'm from Twilight Town, and some of the others live in Toa." "Nowhere in particular,"
Luigi cut her off. He shot her a quick glance, but she wasn't sure what it meant.
"We're just passing through, going wherever the wind takes us."
The room suddenly seemed a bit less warm as Rolf set down his glass and stepped around the makeshift counter. He had that suspicious look in his eyes again, Vivian saw.
"Tell me, how did the wind take your friend into the path of an Empire soldier's spear?"
Luigi was fidgeting in his seat.
"We got into a little kerfuffle back in town. It's nothing to worry about." "Toad Town."
The look in Rolf's eye was pure danger. Luigi was sweating now, and Vivian wasn't sure how the situation had gotten this tense so quickly.
Yep, that's the place. It's lovely this time of year, isn't it?
In a flash, the Thugan had him pinned up against the wall, and Vivian caught the glint of a knife in Rolf's paw.
See, buddy, I know you're lying, because there hasn't been a Toad Town in 20 years. Those tin can nutcases don't get into kerfuffles, and last of all.
He paused to think.
I never ran a badge shop, or had a son.
The knife was at Luigi's throat now.
So why don't you start again and tell me where you're from, before I decide to shave more than your stash?
This was too much.
Wait, stop.
Vivian blurted out, leaping off her bench.
He isn't lying. We were at Princess Peach's castle, and suddenly there was this purple comet in the sky. It was scary, then everything went dark, and those soldiers were everywhere, and Mario got stabbed, and… Lady, you're making less sense by the syllable.
Rolf pulled back from Luigi and started to cross the room.
Princess Peach? Comet in the sky? What do you mean everything got dark? Everything's been dark round here for half my life. But it hasn't.
Vivian insisted.
We were at the Star Festival just a few hours ago, and it was beautiful.
Rolf stumbled and dropped the knife, and for the barest hint of a moment he had the look of a lost little kid.
The Star Festival? They still have that where you're from.
He backed up and leaned against the counter, which gave a small shake in return.
I haven't seen a Star Festival in years. I was just a boy when…
Vivian and Luigi glanced at each other across the room. Neither had any idea what to say to this. Rolf's eyes were lost in the past, and his words were aimed at nobody in particular.
Listen, I'm sorry. I just had to make sure, you know.
He looked up and glanced between the two others.
We'll talk more in the morning, when Raz gets back with the truck. You should probably get some sleep, before then.
He was silent after that, and Vivian gave Luigi a questioning look. He just shrugged at her, so with one last glance toward the back room she glided up the stairs to the loft, and the beds. Try as she might, she didn't get much sleep that night. Princess Peach woke up in a twisted mockery of her childhood bedroom, on a bed so pink it managed to hurt her eyes.
Here I am again, she huffed, kidnapped and carried off who knows where. The gala was going so well, too.
She sat up in bed, smoothing out her slightly tattered dress, and began to absorb the details of the disquieting room. Everything was pink, to begin with. The walls and bed were a painful shade of bubblegum, while the plush carpet was a bit more pastel and easier on the eyes. Every surface was speckled with little hearts, and someone seemed to have coated random bits of furniture in sparkly white glitter. Peach couldn't help but feel slightly mocked by the whole thing. But what unsettled the princess most wasn't the color scheme. It was the layout. She knew this room, at least in appearance. It was where she had slept as a young child, until she had requested a larger bedroom at around 6 years of age. Everything was in its place. Here was her toy chest filled with dolls, and there by the window was the mirror she used when she played dress-up. Somewhere unseen, a music box was tinkling out a familiar lullaby.
How is this possible?
Peach began to wander around the room, stumped.
Toadsworth and I are the only two who remember what this room looked like, aren't we?
Short of time travel, or some unknown former maid selling the information to her captors, the princess had no explanations. The more Peach looked, the more she began to notice a subtle wrongness about the place. The dress-up clothes were faded, the mirror was cracked, and the dolls in the chest were moldy and torn. Trusted old friends and playmates stared up at her with missing eyes and limbs, rotten stuffing spilling from moth-eaten holes in their bodies. Peach shivered, and wished she could somehow put this room back inside her memories where it belonged. Somewhere, the music box began another loop of its haunting melody. Peach didn't want to look at anything in the room anymore, so she stepped over to the window to gaze outside instead. She tried the latch, and surprisingly found that the window could open. Wasting no time, she threw it wide and leaned out into the fresh night air. The first thing she noticed was the ground. Or rather, how terribly far away it was. There was nothing but a sheer drop into oblivion outside the window, and Peach found herself gripping the ledge so tightly her knuckles stung. She was in a tower. Big surprise. But this was a tower that could put most skyscrapers she had seen to shame. If Peach had to guess, her prison was 60, maybe 70 stories in the air. All around her stood similar towers. Some shorter, some much taller, all ivory white and pointed, stabbing at the sky like the spears of a Titan legion. Far below, an impossible labyrinth of battlements and bridges linked the towers together, and beneath that, lines of grey specks marched to and fro like ants through narrow breezeways and courtyards of stone. It was a palace the size of a city, and Princess Peach had never felt so small. Beyond the towers, and past the immense outer wall that surrounded them, an actual city stretched to the horizon. An imposing skyline of sleek modern skyscrapers stood before her, tall and bright against the empty sky. Off to the east, warehouses dominated a sprawling shoreline district beside a still black ocean. The spider-like silhouette of a great suspension bridge spanned the bay, traffic moving back and forth across it as pinpricks of light. With a gasp, Peach realized that she knew that bridge, and the skyline as well.
This is Mushroom City. I've been taken to Mushroom City.
It took her about 3 seconds to start second-guessing herself.
Or have I? There's no palace like this in Mushroom City, but if not there, then where?
She had to figure this out. Turning away from the open window, she marched across the creepy little room and tried the door. It was locked, so she started banging on it instead.
"Excuse me,"
she yelled.
"I know that I'm being guarded, so could somebody kindly answer and tell me where I am?"
There was silence for a moment, but then a low chuckle came through the door.
"You're a long way from home, princess."
The voice said no more than that. Peach sighed and turned away. It was useless. She had been kidnapped again, so that meant waiting for rescue again. As she headed back to the offensively pink bed, she spotted a note on the nightstand that she hadn't seen before.
"How did I miss this?"
she wondered, as she picked up the letter. The paper smelled of honey and lavender oil, and something else she couldn't quite place. Curious, Peach sat down and started to read. Dearest Princess, I bid you a fond welcome to my home. Tragically, I cannot be there to meet you at present, but I assure you that we will speak face to face very soon. In the meantime, your stay here will be as comfortable as I can make it. I had the old bedchamber remade on a bit of a lark, forgive me if I have misremembered the details. You will be kept well fed, although I would not expect any feasts. It would not do if sloth and gluttony claimed your beauty before our meeting, after all. As for your friends and subjects, do not worry for their safety. I assure you they have all been sent home to their families. Warmest wishes. Your Empress. P.S. I am terribly sorry about ruining your gala. I am well aware of how expensive that sort of thing can be. Peach set the letter down with more questions than answers. Who had written this, and could she believe them? Where was she, and why? Sighing again, she lay down on the bed and tried to let the never-ending trill of the music box lull her back to sleep. When Vivian awoke the next morning, the inn was being taken apart around her. She shot up from her little bunk in the loft, and saw that everyone else had already gone. Parts of the floor were missing, as was the entire back wall. Through the new hole, Vivian could see that the sky had faded from pitch black to a rather indecisive ashy gray.
It's better, but...
She headed down the stairs to find everyone bustling about, working together to disassemble the shabby structure. Yoshi was carrying planks outside to what sounded like a bonfire, while Toad and Toadette were making a game out of smashing in the windows.
What is happening in here?
Rolf came over to her holding a plate of breakfast, milk and a fried egg on toast, which she eagerly accepted.
You're a late sleeper, huh? I'll just tell you what I told the others. MMH?
She asked through a mouthful of toast. The Thugan seemed to get the meaning, and kept speaking.
See, we set up this fake inn about a week ago, to keep an eye on the hill where the old castle used to be. Bella got some intel that the Empress goons were planning something up there, and boy, were they ever.
Vivian wasn't following this at all, but she kept listening.
For the past few days, we've watched Empress Toadstool's army scurry all over that hill, clearing the earth while that hooded stooge of hers did something with this huge hunk of metal they had dragged in. So, this isn't a real inn? You were watching those soldiers.
Vivian was at least trying to get the gist of the tale.
Yeah, well, the idea was that one would wander in here for a drink at some point, and we'd be able to interrogate them, but that never happened.
Rolf kicked the counter over, glasses shattering without a care.
Something else went down instead. We showed up.
Vivian had so many questions. The Thugan just nodded.
First, that hunk of metal shot into the sky like a purple rocket and vanished. 10 minutes later, a new castle appeared out of nowhere. Then the army moved in, and, well, that's when you seven showed up. I wasn't sure who you were at first. Thought you might have been spies sent by the Empress. Sorry about that.
Luigi and Yoshi were tearing up the floor now, as Rainy and a blue-spotted toad carried supplies out from the back.
So what's happening now?
Vivian asked.
We're packing up,
Rolf said while taking her empty plate,
and covering our tracks. There's nothing else to see here, so we're headed back home to safety.
Before Vivian could think what to ask next, a chipper new voice called in from outside.
Hey, guys. The truck's fueled up, and that red guy's all cushy in the back. I totally think he might wake up soon.
The voice was getting closer, and Vivian was sure she had heard it before.
What smells so good in here? You all saved me some eggs, yeah.
In through the doorway waddled a pale pink Goomba, her long blonde hair tied hastily into a ponytail that still managed to sweep the floor. Her face was smeared with mud and motor oil from outside, but there was no mistaking her bright, intelligent eyes.
Goombella, is that you?
Vivian couldn't help but gasp as she flew across the room to catch her old friend in a hug.
Okay, whoa.
Goombella backed away, alarmed.
You seem nice and all, but, like, we just met. Let's save the hugging until we've bonded, 'kay? Oh yeah,
Vivian realized,
this isn't the Goombella I know, just like that isn't the Rolf that Luigi knows.
The thought made her sad. Everyone was staring at her, friends and strangers alike, which made her realize the one question she hadn't yet asked.
So, who are you guys, anyway?
Rolf rubbed the back of his neck.
Well, since you're stuck with us for now.
The alternate Goombella took over, looking up at Vivian with an impish grin.
We're the Ammonite Resistance, and we're the last hope for peace this broken world has.
End of chapter.